Why is the water pink and sticky? Wes wondered. Hot water and soap suds fell across his back. He felt the sticky pink water stain his skin. Tiny worms slid out of the shower head. He leapt through the shower curtain and slipped on the wet tile. Blood spilled from his body, so he reached for a towel. When he turned on the sink water, pink water spewed and tiny worms crawled out. Where are these worms coming from, he wondered. When he flushed the toilet, the water was pink too. In the mirror, warm pink steam stained his reflection. Wes dialed his landlord in a panic and said, "I think there's some sort of infestation. There's something that may have gone wrong with the plumbing." "Did you listen to the radio this morning?" the landlord asked. "The radio?" Wes replied, astonished. "How about the television?" "What does it matter?" Wes asked. "Leave them both off," said the landlord. "The authorities are working on it." Wes hung up the phone. He turned off the radio and television and then slipped his suit over his shoulders. The last bite of bagel and cream cheese slid into his stomach. He was tired from a nightmare the night before and felt its horror follow him into the car and front door of his job. The feeling of the nightmare added to the stress of the day since he had to meet with the president of a large pharmaceutical company. His client was stern, bold and demanding. Over lunch, the two men ate and shared differing viewpoints. In the restaurant restroom, Wes dabbed the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Over the urinal, he pondered his next strategy, his contingency plan against the firm resistance of his client. He sealed the zipper on his pants and stepped into the mirror. The sweat returned. Wes yanked a brown towel from the holder and turned on the faucet. Once again, the water was pink and sticky. It stained the white sink after it drained. Is there a problem with the city water, he wondered. Am I going mad? Has the stress finally caught up with me? The men finished their business talk and lunch. Back in the main office building, dozens of people were frightened of the sticky pink water in the sinks, faucets and toilets. Valerie, the lead secretary, dialed the service center and requested a plumber, but none could be found. All of the plumbers were busy on other jobs. She got angry at one of the plumber's secretaries. "But this is urgent," Valerie insisted. "The worms are crawling out of the toilet bowls. They're on the floors, in the water fountain drains and faucets." "Do not fear," replied the secretary. "There's nothing dangerous about the worms or sticky water. It is as red as blood, but it is not blood. Just make sure all television signals and radio equipment is out of use. This is a mandatory requirement of the FCC right now." "But what's causing this?" "Just leave the radio and televisions off and be patient." The phone call disconnected. Silence filled her ear. She redialed the number quickly. It rang a few times. A voice on the line suddenly said, "The number you have dialed has been disconnected. Please wait and retry your call at a later time. Goodbye." Valerie updated Wes on the news. "I'm scared, Wes," she said. "These worms are everywhere." Wes replied, "The way nobody is saying anything but a turn of the radio and televisions. Something's not right. It's like they know something." "I know," she said. "My mother said her pool water is pink as blood and worms are crawling out of the drain pipes. My sister is afraid to boil her baby's milk bottle in that red water. My brother said they're sliding over the city reservoir walls and plunging to the bottom. The sides of the reservoir are stained red. He said it looks like blood is dripping down the reservoir. What the heck is going on here? This is terrifying. What on earth is causing this?" "I don't know," Wes replied. He stepped to the window and watched the rain begin to fall. He listened to a heavy wind sway the trees and the thick rain thump the glass. "Give the employees a paid day of leave and tell them to go home." Just then she screamed and kicked her high heels off. One of the worms got wedged inside of her heel and sent Valerie into hysteria. As Wes ran over to help her, Wes slid on a patch of red slime that sent him headfirst into the floor. When he opened his eyes, he saw Valerie's hair full of the worms. They were squirming through the ceiling vent and plopping down all over her, as if they were attacking her. Wes thought, "My God, this is terrible." In less than 15 minutes, the entire building was empty and silent. Darkness descended outside. The sky was blood red from a looming storm of heavy rain and violent gusts of wind. The palm trees' branches foretold of great tumultuous traveling danger. Wes locked the front door and exited to the parking lot. He fought the wind with tense legs and arms. The worms were crawling around every crack and crevice in the asphalt. It was disgusting, Wes thought. He hurried into the car and clutched steering wheel and hit the gas. The city streets were empty. No cars were around. Every rain puddle in the road was as red as blood. Suddenly, a heavy pink fog had begun to descend, and Wes sensed something horrifying was bound to happen. The fog was like a living worm in and of itself. Everything about the fog was like a worm, its shape, its texture, its sudden movement. That was when the heavy pink fog surrounded the car as if it was alive, as if it was a part of the worm culture, all to corner Wes in and make him succumb to the invasion of them. Suddenly, a glob of red goop splattered against the windshield, and then another glob of red goop struck, and then another, and then another. Damn it, he thought. Am I imagining things? What the hell is happening here? Wes turned on the windshield wipers to get all that red slime off the window. The goop barely budged. It got caught up in the wipers and slowed them down. The red stuff was streaking everywhere. That was when he heard thumping sounds strike the car roof. It sounded like hail. Yes, hail, Wes thought. And then that's when he saw a clump of them slide down the windshield like a bowl of spaghetti. Yes, a glob of red worms like spaghetti. My God, Wes thought. He watched the glob slide into the center of the windshield. That's when the windshield wipers stopped and got stuck. Wes slammed on the brakes and heard the tires screech. He couldn't see a thing outside, and the windshield wipers didn't move anymore. Red slime covered the front glass, every corner and inch of it. The worms started to crawl and squirm and make their way for the doors. Wes wanted to dial Valerie. He searched for the phone, but where was it, damn it? Where on earth is the phone? Wes slid out of the car. The worms were everywhere, his hair, his face, his lips. The rain fell harder and lightning once again filled the air. Wes tried to run but fell into a shallow ditch. His face smeared into a pond of worms and his eyes began to sting from the itchy, sticky red slime. Worms slithered into his hair and shirt pockets and sleeves. He even felt them crawling up into his pant legs in clumps. Thick clumps of spaghetti-like substance, all red and slimy like bloody red sauce, and he was going to go mad. Yes, Wes knew he was going to really lose it as he swatted all the worms away. Collect yourself, Wes thought. Get those legs going and get the heck out of here. Suddenly the red fog started to clear, as if it were alive and living, and needed to haunt another lost soul in the world. It was as if the fog was called away by some demon. Through the clearing, Wes eyed the road ahead. Debris was everywhere. Fallen palm trees' limbs, branches, toppled trash bins. Wes got back up on his feet and bolted for the main road in hopes that someone might see him. He wished he knew where his cell phone was. He wished he could call Valerie. That's when he heard a car horn honking. The sound kept echoing from beyond the building near the fire escape. The honking ensued, as if to call attention to him. That was when the red fog started to make its way over towards the sound. The red fog was like the shape of a big worm itself. with the jagged texture of rings and spiral shapes rotating. Yes, it was as if the red fog was alive and heading for the sound too. Wes bolted for the building as the car horn kept honking and honking. Just as he was able to see the headlights on the car, the red fog blocked his eyes and shot at his face. He felt the fog press into his skin, and it was sticky and red and pink, and the fog felt like it had suction cups snapping in against his skin, and the red foggy mist kept snapping in and out, as if it were trying to prick his skin for a taste of his blood. Just then Wes heard a woman's voice yell out into the air, but he couldn't make out the face. That wretched red fog blocked any sight of her as it headed for the headlights in the car. The voice kept yelling out and yelling, but he couldn't see a blasted thing, not a thing. But he ran anyways, ran right into the red mist that engulfed him with the feeling of a million little teeth sinking suction cups into his flesh. That was when he heard a woman scream, and Wes knew he was doomed. Wes yanked a worm away from his lip, but yet it clung to the edge of his chin like it was stapled inside. It pained him to dig in and tear the wretched thing loose, but he did, and then he tossed it aside as he hurried towards where he'd heard the scream. The air was filled with red fog. He hadn't heard another thing after the woman's voice yelled out, and not the car horn anymore either. The worm-like fog slithered away from where the sound originated from, and made its way over towards the fire escape, as if it was sensing someone or something about to emerge. That's when Wes suddenly saw the shape of a tall man dragging a body in front of him. It was a woman's body, yes, long-haired and red, and with breasts curving up and out. And then Wes noticed the black skirt above the legs and the logo on the side. That yellow logo, his company logo. Val, Wes said. My God, Val. He ran over to the man and wanted to club him. What on earth did this man do to Valerie? What? Just then the man shot a hard glance at Wes and told him to keep back. He said he was helping her, that she passed out after being attacked by that wretched living fogworm. Wes eyed her skin. Maybe the stranger was right. Wes saw red bite marks all over her facial cheeks, neck and arms. Tiny specks of teeth marks, like needle puncture marks all over, like measles or mumps and chicken pox. But they were bite marks from a worm, tiny pinpricks all over. Red, turning purple, blood speckled, disgusting, terrifying. Wes imagined them biting into his skin, pricking and pinning tiny teeth into him. Poor Val. It was like she almost had been eaten alive by that thing. She's still alive. The man said, I heard the car horns and ran out to see who got stranded. That's when I noticed her and that thing. For some reason it got startled and darted away from her when I ran over. I'm not sure why, it doesn't matter. Come on, the man said. Give me a hand with her. I need your help. They both propped Val up to her feet and carried her towards the field. They could hear all the worms squishing beneath their feet, and it was a terrible sound. Slimy, slippery goo. Wet, red mush. Wes wanted to take the shortcut through the alley, but he knew the man was probably right. The man said they needed to take a long U-turn approach to his house to avoid that worm-like fog lingering in the alleyway near the black fire escape. Yes, that spiraling worm-like fog which nearly devoured poor Val. The man suspected that worm-like fog lingered in the alley because that was the way in which the man had come from. He said that's probably why the worm-like fog lingered near the fire escape, perhaps in hopes that they would pass between the buildings of the alley and get cornered and trapped. My house is way over there, but we're safer going the long way. They dragged the body to the man's house nearby, a grey shed-like structure dilapidated. We're running out of time before the next wave strikes, the man said. Next wave? What wave? Never mind that, the man said. Just help me get her inside. When they reached the door, the man shot Wes an annoyed glance and then propped up Valerie into Wes. They wasted no time hurrying inside. The worms were all over the floors. They were overflowing in the kitchen sink too. The ceiling fans stopped moving from the weight of them. The man grabbed a broom and began swatting at them all over. The man was terribly angry, and his face reddened with hate. Don't just stand there. the man yelled at Wes. "Lay her down on the couch and get busy with the hammer and nails." "Hammer and nails?" Wes asked. "Yeah, over there on the kitchen counter. Grab 'em. There's no time to waste. You've got to nail in the doors and plywood. This is about to get a lot worse." Wes kept nailing in the plywood to the door frames and windows, and that was after he put on the blue gloves and filled up 3 buckets full of worms. After he emptied the sink, he used rubber cement to seal in the drain pipes, and that was throughout the house. There wasn't much time to waste. According to the man, he'd heard on shortwave radio from a whistleblower scientist in Britain that the invasion was spawned by some strong and distinct solar flare storm. Apparently the solar flares were strumming the rings of Saturn as if it was some sort of cosmic harp that summoned the critters up and out of the Earth. Some sort of rare sound vibration which reached the Earth and caused the worms to crazily rise up and flood the surface. The shortwave said another enormous blast of solar flare struck the rings, and that within minutes the sound vibration would strike the surface, and that it would be 100 times greater than any others received on Earth. That meant all hell was about to break loose, and quite literally from the gates of Hades itself, from whatever the hell lurked down below. All of those remaining red worms spawning and churning down there right this second. The man sprayed the buckets with gasoline and then lit them on fire just outside the attic window where those creeping crawlers couldn't yet reach the window frame, at least not yet. Because the worms were rising higher and higher in the fields, yard and streets, and there was still enough room before they reached the base of the kitchen window. Heck, you couldn't see a darn thing from the attic window, not a trace of any pavement, streets, sidewalks or natural ground. Wes finished, and then helped the man shake Valerie awake. She was disorientated but came around. She was out of it, really out of it, Wes thought as he stared back at her, wide-eyed, nervous. Her nails were purple and her lips quivered as if she was suffering a chill, and her body was cold, ice cold. The man was right. There wasn't much time. A terrible humming sound suddenly struck the air, and the worms seemed to rise up out of the soil in a fury. Tens upon tens of thousands of them, enough to fill up whatever sight was left out of the kitchen window. They were surrounding now, completely surrounded by those creeping red menaces, and you could hear them chewing at the wooden frames of the house, trying to eat their way in, their scissor-sharp teeth gnawing on the wood frames and panels, and even the window glass. "Come on," said the man. "Let's get her up to the attic and then board in the floor. It's our only chance, damn it. The only chance." Valerie worked the shortwave radio, while Wes nailed a pile of plywood into the trapdoor in the floor. The worms were rising up so fast that they'd buried the lowest trunks of the oak trees and all the branches and first-story windows of each neighboring house. The man kept pouring gasoline out the window and setting them on fire as they rose higher and higher. The scent was terrible, wretched. Thousands and thousands of those red squirming things going up in flames. It was almost as if you could hear all their screams in the blast of the fire, but they couldn't scream, no, and only a terrified mind could hear one. "We're almost out of gasoline," the man said to Wes. "Darn it, we're running out of time. They're rising too high and too fast." Suddenly a loud blast of sound pounded the air. It pounded and pounded, and the humdrum rolled the walls. It was a loud moaning and droning, as if from an amplifier as large as a cloud or as large as the moon. The noise kept droning on and on. The 3 of them covered their ears with their hands. The droning sound was loud and strange, a sound none of them had ever heard before. "Wes, Wes," the man shouted, "get over here and look." "What?" "Just hurry," said the man. "Get over here and see." Wes hurried over and glanced out at the fields and streets. The worms were retreating. Yes, the worms were retreating down back into the soil. The worms kept retreating down and down because of the sound. It had to be because of the sound, because the worms were retreating into the soil until all of the soil became brown mush and mud, and not a trace of any worms were left. None except for those that had been lit up by the gasoline and fires, or had been smeared over by the fallen debris of trees and branches. "What happened?" the man asked. Just then a voice came over the shortwave and said the military had used some sort of sonar pulse weapon to repel the worms. The weapons were being used all over the world to repel the worms, to offset that awful vibration from the rings of Saturn which had finally passed beyond the Earth and left all of humanity safe. And the shortwave said that these unprecedented solar flares were also finally at their end, and that everyone could begin to recoup and recover from whatever the hell had just happened in every corner of the globe. That was a relief. The three of them glanced at each other. Valerie fell into Wes's arms and hugged him tight. She didn't have to say a word, and neither did he. The other man grabbed the hammer and went to work unhinging the plywood Wes had nailed in to secure them safely. The worm invasion was over, finally over, but would they ever come back? Wes could never be sure, and neither could Valerie. They never looked at a drainpipe the same way, not ever again. The same went for the other man and all the rest. No one ever looked at any drainpipe or toilet bowl the same way, not after what happened with all of those creepy crawlers, those darn wretched blasted worms.